Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today I've got something just a little bit different for you. If you're at all familiar with speedrunning in DRG, the formalized type of speedrunning, you're probably aware that pretty much everything that happens in DRG speedrunning, aside from the tutorial category, is done on your normal save file. I think you can see where I'm going with this. I've been deep down a rabbit hole of just watching random games speedrunning content recently, from everything from the original Super Mario Bros. To The Simpsons Hit and Run. And one thing that I've noticed that it kind of is amazing that it went over my head until now is that DRG is one of the only speed games that I know of that doesn't involve making a new file. And I mean, there's good reason for this. Deep Rock Galactic and its instance missions clearly play by much different rules than a full playthrough of a Nintendo game or a story campaign in a first-person shooter. However, there is a few good milestones that we can treat as an endpoint for a speedrun in DRG. And if you're familiar with my grievances with formalized speedrunning in DRG, you know that I really despise the seed rolling meta, or not even meta, but just requirement of competing for good speedrun times. Effectively, if you want to have the best industrial sabotage speedrun in the world, you have to get lucky with a seed as well as being one of the best players. And when I say get lucky with a seed, I mean sit there resetting the mission for hours at a time, looking for that opportunity to even compete. The solution for this, that I've personally found the most enticing, is speedruns that involve multiple missions. And that's what we're going to be doing today. This is what I refer to as Chiv %. As many of us have probably forgotten at this point, whenever you start playing Deep Rock Galactic, you are required to progress through a 10-mission assignment that introduces you to the different mission types in the game as you play through them progressively, unlocking the regions and mission types. So what better way to roll a objective that is clearly defined and playing multiple missions to avoid seed farming into one little speedrun category. This is my first crack at this, and I did basically no routing ahead of time, so you will definitely see me on a few occasions fumbling around for upgrades, trying to figure out what's good, and trying to make some effective meta decisions, and failing in most situations. I also really don't care to see this as a formalized speedrun category, as I doubt very many people would be interested in playing it, as it, obviously prevents you from getting any XP on your main file, requires you to make a new save, and obviously play through the early game, which makes you feel very underpowered. For that reason, obviously, I'm not using a formalized timer, I didn't turn off my mods. The only real rule that I even followed is that I played it on Hazard 2, just to feel out the proof of concept. I'd definitely be interested in doing this again later on at some point on Hazard 4, or maybe even finding some way to manipulate it to do it on Hazard 5, but regardless, if you are interested in participating in this, I obviously don't have a very clear rule set for you to follow. By all means, leave all your quality of life mods, all the verified mods that make the game easier, no need to time it, because there's a really beautiful feature of this category of running that allows us to actually time our missions much more easily, which is, once we complete the final mission of the assignment, we can go and look in our KPI terminal in our room and see our total mission time. It's not accurate lower than a second, but in a category like this, I don't think that would matter anyways. I'm going to leave the space rig sections in, as I think the idea of having the space rig sections be timed as well is very interesting whenever you're making these early game upgrade decisions in potentially this category or a longer one. Obviously, looking at the mission terminal at the end to get our final time does not include that space rig time, but I was just kind of playing like it was time to theoretically just show how that would look in the future. So I don't really plan to commentate this entire run. I'll probably just interject a little bit of commentary here and there based on what I was thinking, what I was doing in the missions. Some of them are far less interesting than others, but I'll try to kind of talk through my thought process on why I'm doing what. So going into the post-commentary now, this is the first 200 Morkite mining mission. Playing as Scout, obviously, as blind drilling with Driller, is something that I would want to do, like try to blind drill directly to the treasure room at the end of the cave, but with base drills and limited fuel as well as slow mining on Bosco, so I'm really just kind of all on my own in that regard. I don't know, it might still work out, but from my perspective, I just didn't feel confident in that, so I went with a safe pick and went Scout. But as you can see here, I've definitely got enough Morkite left. So just trying to juggle between getting Molly closer to the Morkite and also not just sitting there twiddling my thumbs. So see here, I'll drop in the Morkite as fast as I can and instantly get her moving again. It's very important that whenever you're trying to move Molly fast for distance, and this applies to the normal game as well, is to not call her more than you need to. I have a bad habit of doing it, I think most of us do, but effectively every time that you call Molly, it gives her a little quarter of a second, I'm not sure if it's exactly that much, a split second of stun. So basically, you can think of her like a GPS. Whenever you drop a new pin for Molly to go to, she has to recalculate for a split second. So if you spam the button, it's most evident because she will actually stun in place. Which can actually be really useful if you're ever trying to keep Molly in a centralized location. You'll see that later in this run. I don't do a good job of it because it's an absolute disaster situation. I do take a couple downs in this run, just to be clear. I think both are because of fall damage, because I didn't have a armor upgrade on Scout to reduce fall damage, but that's beside the point. Stop coping ahead of time. But basically what I'm getting at is if you ever need Molly to stay in a place and she starts to move because you get too far away from her, the best thing you can do is actually to mash the call mule button until you get close to her again to make her sit down. Because by doing that, if you're trying to keep her on top of 5 eggs or something, and you see her start to get up to follow you across the cave, if you mash the call mule button, you can basically delay her getting away from the area you want her to be. I'll make sure to call that out when it happens, but like I said, it doesn't go super well for me. A recurring theme you'll see on pretty much all these missions, aside from point extraction and refinery, is attempting to drop bot clip with varying degrees of success. There's still really no formalized science on this. Effectively, anyone that you see doing this is just holding forward and right. Some people do it backwards. I do it forwards. I don't feel like it makes any difference. Effectively, whenever you see people doing this, they're just holding forward and right and just jumping slowly. Just jump once, and as you come back down and you start to get back to where you started, where you were standing, jump again. And sometimes you'll just pop in. As far as I know, no one knows how to do this consistently, and people just have varying degrees of success with it. Sometimes you'll get it instantly when you jump up there, sometimes you'll flail with it for like a full minute. So I learned a lot from this first run, namely that some of the upgrades that I thought were going to be harder to obtain are actually obtainable basically after the first mission. Namely, the most important upgrade that I thought was going to be harder to get is the improved mining speed for Bosco. I did not realize that was unlocked by default just for 400 credits, so if we were to say claim the Steam community group bonus 5,000 credits, you'd actually be able to get the faster mining on Bosco off rip. So that's on its own a huge time loss in this run. So learned that. Here you can see a really good egg seed that I don't do an incredible job with. I'm still kind of like this is like I was talking about before, really no routing, so I'm entertaining the idea of like trying to get my scout up a few levels to theoretically grab some like grappling hook upgrades. I have no good excuse for not doing more research before I did this run. I'll definitely be doing some post-mortem and routing out better in future, especially if I'm going to do this on higher difficulties. So if you see me doing anything weird with like trying to half-ass a secondary objective or something, that's why, is because I'm thinking like, oh, maybe this XP will make a difference, or maybe this one Bismore that I'm able to grab, one cube of Bismore that I grab would be able to make a difference. So once again, talking about drop pod clipping, You can clip up through the bottom of the pod and get into the pod that way. I mess up the rhythm here and get too far out to the side. It's better to be a little bit lower than that. So, that said though, I did have a backup plan, which is why I was already pulling Molly up and towards the pod. That way, in case I did miss that clip, like I did. Once again, no great excuse, because the up warp clip from the bottom is way more consistent than the side clip. So basically, like you're seeing, it's a hierarchy of try up warp clip if you can get to where the pod's landing, then try Molly Bay, and then just wait it out. But regardless, you always want to have Molly moving towards the pod, because until the pod actually smacks the ground, Molly doesn't start pathing to the pod on her own. You have to guide her, because she's still following you. And here's another thing that made me really interested in like making up this category is the choice of classes, right? Is picking driller here was not necessary, but hopefully I can make use of it. So Refinery is a really interesting mission for speed, in my opinion. It's kind of gets a little janky and scary for formalized speedrunning if you get really bad map generation. But it's one of my favorite missions, and it's the mission that I used to visualize the speedrun insight a while back, to basically say like when things stop and start and when you can and can't be productive. Because it's like, until the refinery lands, there is no possible way that I can start pumping, right? There's no way that I can connect a pipeline before the refinery actually gets here. But the things that I can front load, like calling in the pump jacks, finding the pump jacks, and everything like that, can be done ahead of time. So you see me trying to really like wring that out here, of me finding and dropping the pump jacks before the refinery even landed, because obviously, although it doesn't take long, taking that time to hold the button to call in the pump jack once the refinery is on the ground is wasted time. The refinery is another great piece of proof for me that Bosco is just an absolute cornerstone of solo, and makes solo with Bosco much more interesting than without, because managing him and keeping him on pipelines is by far one of the greater testaments of skill. Anytime I watch someone play Refinery, and trying to keep Bosco on task is always super interesting. So here is where I obviously neglect to consider that I switched to Driller for one specific purpose, which is routing the pipe into the side cave. I couldn't tell you why, but I got very caught up in the idea of locating the side cave and where its entrance was, and for some reason decided that I should take the pipe with me rather than finding the pump jack and then drilling back to the refinery. What can I say? I'm still breaking the rust off. Haven't played in a good while. It's about here that I realized my mistake, and you'll see me stealing glances at the refinery through the walls for a while, and just considering why I did this. Thankfully, not too much time was wasted on the actual management, though, because Bosco is still building pipe number 2. So as I'm building these pipelines, I'm just staring at the HUD. Once I saw pipe 2 complete, I called Bosco back to me. And the reason that I did that rather than pinging the pipeline is because if you complete the building on a link, Bosco will no longer be tracking that you want him to build the pipeline. If you go back a few seconds there, you can see that when I completed that link after pinging the pipeline, he lost his connection to it and I had to ping it again. So that was a mistake. I just couldn't tell exactly how far he was and how fast he was going to be in getting to the pipeline, so I went ahead and pinged it when I did. As hindsight tells us, I should have waited one more link build. Stealing that glance at the train scanner to realize just how long this thing is and didn't have to be. Also, I definitely came way too far with Bosco here. I should have broken off at least one link sooner, maybe two, as it would have allowed me to surf back to the refinery while Bosco was finishing the pipe. As you can see, the lights on the pipe I'm on just turned green, so that was my indication that the pipe was already done. So I left at least one link too late and lost some time because of that. So like I was talking about before with the trying to do things other than just the primary in the interest of gaining XP and materials, that's kind of what I'm thinking about here, is I know the pipes aren't going to jam for a little bit, so I'm going to try to pocket some extra nitra for XP, some Enor pearls, some Bismore where I can. No good excuse for moving towards Phase Unite, no. Don't know what that was all about. You see me ping Bosco off into the distance here. My thought with that is that if a pipe breaks on that side of the cave, Bosco will be closer to it, so that he will have less distance to fly in the event that there is a broken linkage on that side. What I'm trying to do right here is just keep the widest line of sight that I can on all of the pipelines, so that not only can I identify which pipes break based on the red lights, because I'm not memorizing the pipe numbers, but I can also theoretically see enough links that even if the broken link is behind one of these pillars, I can ping close enough on the pipe to it that I get it. So, for example, there, the broken pipe was on the other side of the refinery, and I was still able to ping Bosco onto it by just pinging near it on the pipeline. So that was ideal. I was able to fix both breaks basically as fast as possible there. So here I can feel the next break coming up, so I'm trying to get myself back in position, rather than taking that pearl in and risking being dislocated when I need to be in a position where I can rep. So here I'm looking at my HUD and realizing, okay, I have another broken pipeline. In solo, it's entirely possible this other broken pipeline will only have one break. I identify that one right there. Maybe it's the only one, I'm not sure. I don't see another one in the room, so I'm going to get on the pipe and start moving towards the far end, and then check my map for if there's any breaks visible. There wasn't, so I just turn around and come back. Once again, still caught up on the idea of trying to do a secondary objective, so I'm lingering a little bit further than the refinery than I probably should be, but with a little bit of good movement, I'll be there basically the exact time it's done. I don't deposit before launching the rocket because I will have a few seconds here while the rocket is launching to drop stuff in. Just knowing general refinery cave layouts, I know where the drop pod is going to land. It's going to be out here on this tangent of the cave. So I've cleared pretty much everything that I want out of the main cave, so now I'm going to come out here and see what I can find while waiting for the pod to land. Once again, we're going to play for up warp, end up missing it, so we're able to deposit and actually get credit for the secondary. Not too much time lost by that, but I definitely would have been faster if I'd have just went and stood in front of the doors whenever I missed the clip. So another mining mission. This one will play out just about the same as the first one. Gets a little tight on Morkite at the end, but we get through it just fine. So at this stage in the game, Bosco and I are about the same speed at digging through dirt. It's just that I'm a lot more accurate, especially if I check the terrain scanner. Bosco has a tendency to go kind of in the wrong direction, and that is heavily exacerbated by Bosco right now having slow dig speed. So he's even weaker at traversing dirt, so I try to do it more myself than put it off on him. Sometimes he does really well, though. Got very lucky here and had these two caves right back to back without a lot of tunnel connecting them. Usually 225s are pretty long due to the connecting tunnels being just as snaky as all the others, so this one being as short as it was very, very nice. Not much Morkite in here, though, which is unfortunate. So here you can see a small misplay and me trying to use the mule stunning. I bring her up here because obviously I want her to be closer to the direction where we're going to be progressing in, but she ends up following me back down while I'm doing this because I wanted Bosco to go up and finish while I grabbed a little bit more, and she ends up coming down. You see me stunning her hard to keep her close to the bottom. I was going to go back up top and then call her back up, then deposit, but I realized she's already next to me, and we're going to be through the wall, or at least I thought so, by the time I got back up here. So I ended up deciding to set her down fully down there, and then get her moving again. Also, because if I find Morkite in this tunnel, I'll be able to fit it in my pockets, because I deposited it before now. So at this point, I'm essentially gambling that I'm not going to find another big vein on its own before we get to the next big cave, because I'm effectively full, and Molly is going to take a while to catch up. When it comes to resource nodes, knocking them down and manipulating them to go faster, downwards trajectory rooms are always great to see, because you can get a lot of assistance from the nodes breaking loose and falling downhill. It doesn't work out very well in this situation. A lot of it gets stuck pretty much up where it was dug from, but it's always something ideal is whenever you're able to roll the resources downhill. I stole a little peek in the next room to see if, or excuse me, in the tunnel to see if there was anything I could mine while waiting on Molly. I should have deposited in her right there before I went up to get this, because as you can see I filled up far too fast and ended up leaving the rest of that behind just because I didn't want to go back. So pretty bad misplay there. I was just kind of caught up on the idea that she was already pinned to go into the tunnel on her own. So this is the last room that we're going to get in this run. Like I said, Morkite gets a little tight here. I ended up having to get a lucky spawn of a vein in a side tunnel. Very fortunately, I got it very quickly, so very minimal time loss on that, but it was very, very, very fortunate, because I do believe this was the last cave of this mission. That's another important thing when we're talking about Molly going where you want her to go, is as long as you have a pin that she's traversing to, no matter how far away you get from that pin, she will continue going to it. So as soon as she's sitting still and then you dislocate too far from her, she's going to pop up and start following you. But as long as you have a route for her that you determined, or that she waypointed by you being too far away, she will ignore your exact location and just go straight to it. So that's why I was able to safely break off that first time while she was still routing down, yet whenever I went back to pick up the Morkite that I mined while I was full, she immediately started trekking after me. Now this was a good opportunity to not deposit, as I have enough inventory room to fit the rest of the mission objective in my pocket, so there was no reason to stop Molly and myself there in order to deposit. And there's a great example of clipping just working sometimes. Here's the first time you'll see me start trying to sneak in some upgrades. So looking at my flare, or trying to look at my grappling hook, realizing that I don't have the minerals that I need for faster recharges, which is what would have helped me more, and then going for faster mining and rockets since I was already there. So now that Bosco has faster mining, I definitely want him to be involved in the dirt wall digging pretty much every time. I've had him there all the time up until now, but considering I didn't opt to look for power attack on that last mission, it's definitely wise for Bosco to be involved. Of all the secondaries to try to sneak in while doing fast boy things, Ball Barnacles is definitely up there. Right up there with Fester Fleas. Little manipulation of enemy AI here, doing a lot of slows to try to keep this Praetorian at arm's length. Slows, stuns. It's very interesting trying to play enemies like this. It teaches you a lot about the game and how to be a little more resilient. Subtle foreshadowing, I shouldn't be talking about how resilient I am right now. But anyways, learning how to manipulate the enemies in close range, uncomfortable situations with minimal tools is very valuable, and I'm not saying you by any means have to make a new save file to do it, but just understanding how to like widen the gaps between you and certain enemies to make it so their melee attack gets to you a little bit later so that you're able to finish repairing something while they only get one melee swing off instead of two. Things like that are extremely valuable. Some pretty good item handling here as well. Really, really nasty terrain. So you see here I waypoint the Praetorian's AI over in this corner, and then take the leg with me and start on the mule. And because I slowed him, his pathfinding still has him going in that direction for a lot more time, even though it was the same distance. I don't think he would have got to me anyways, because the IFG on me and the way radioactive Praetorians work, where they roar before their area actually gets to you. I don't think he would have really hurt me or pushed me off that objective, but still felt really cool that I was able to predict that and make it happen. This is some of our very little free time in Salvage until we're waiting for the pod to open, which is waiting for the mules to walk back. A great way that you can be time efficient on salvage if you are trying to get some random stuff, either killing fester fleas or mining some sort of minerals around the room, is to leave everything that has line of sight from the uplink until you're actually doing the uplink, and then having boss go take care of that. Obviously, I wasn't too conscious of what I was doing and what I was leaving, because I wasn't really doing anything but the objectives, but if you see a lot of gold veins around an uplink when you're playing solo, and you are going to plan to get them, it's a great idea to leave them until you're doing the uplink. I did think that was a pearl glowing in the distance, not a mule leg. So the reason I say leave line of sight for the uplink type stuff rather than fuel cells is because obviously fuel cells are completely unpredictable where they're going to land, so trying to predictively leave stuff for the fuel cells is just asking for trouble, as you very well may not be able to do that stuff during fuel cells, and then you'll be stuck trying to do it while waiting for the pod. So here you'll see me basically trying to squeeze as much stuff as I can into the drop pod waiting sequence. No, that's okay, get in the way. I'll figure it out. Take it from me, kids. Gold only brings time loss into your life. So it was hard to see there, but I did actually decide not to take high velocity rounds for this mission. So egg missions are definitely one of the bigger things that I'm considering if I was to step this up to Hazard 4 or maybe even a higher difficulty through the use of some like save file manipulation or something, is just the scout would not be the play for egg hunt, just because with the base grappling hook I don't think you would be able to pull 4 or 6 eggs without dying. Subtle foreshadowing. So yeah, it would be challenging for sure. I would assume gunner or maybe driller would be the way to go to do these quickly. Oh, this egg is a travesty. Oh, it must be under the ground or through that dirt wall here. Oh no, it's below me. Look at the wall. Well, it's not in that wall. It must be up here under the ground or behind that dirt wall. Oh no, it's below me. Good job. Third try's the charm. Travesty with that egg isn't over yet, unfortunately, because I tried to call Molly right there and accidentally recall Bosco. I have those buttons right next to each other, so yeah, like I said, the travesty of this egg continues, but I think we're finally going to get it here. Good job. You clicked one button. You can see me kind of debating whether or not I want to let Bosco get to me and throw me this egg, or if I want to run for that one now. Actually, if I'd have pressed shout right there instead of grabbing it from him, he would have thrown it through me and pretty much directly towards Molly, so I definitely should have thought about that in the moment. And I believe this is the second death we take as well. We love the grappling hook. Upgrades not required. And this is a great example of Molly pinging where I was and really screwing me over by running up to that cliff. Although this stingtail probably would have just ripped me off of the button if I tried to press it anyways, so maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. There's not very many enemies in low difficulty speedrunning that are actually like must kills. Obviously, then when there's this much stuff on you, if you need to stand still to do anything, you kind of have to thin it out a little bit unless you're just pressing a button. But things like stingtails, grabbers, leeches, obviously you gotta deal with. And here we can see the upwarp clip actually working out. As long as you stay pressing towards the center, mashing or holding jump, you can usually always make it as long as you get the initial in that you need. If I didn't say it before, the first time I failed the upwarp clip was because I was too high in the bowl and basically just got pushed up and out instead of down and in. Ah, yes, the old can you count to 7 mission. Spoilers, I still can't. These last 2 missions being glacial introduced one really big problem, was the NATO site shockers really throw a wrench into a lot of things, which they don't show up in very many biomes, so having to play in one of the ones that they do is really unfortunate. Got very lucky here with this little cryofoam pad being there to catch me when I mined that a cork. I saw that it was there, you know, I went for it, but just it being there at all was fortunate. That a cork trolled me. I was going up there to throw it down. This is the exact moment. You can probably see it dawning on me that I realized I forgot how to count. Thankfully, the 8th core that I grabbed was pretty close, so didn't waste too much time. Fortunately, that bounce that it took wasted quite a bit of time. What's this blue glow? God, not having the velocity on the grappling hook is a real killer for movement. Point extractions are also pretty easy to predict where the pause will spawn. I'm pretty sure I was trying to upwarp in there, but you could tell by my positioning that I really just wanted to deposit the secondary and actually get credit for it, so not sure why I went for the back bin instead of one of the sides, which would have been faster. So I decided to flip Bosco over to damage on bullets for this run, as I'm thinking about the elevator shaft section, and if there is any significant amount of enemies pouring in on me, I want Bosco to be able to kill them more effectively on his own while I focus on repairs so that we have 0 time loss. Also because I effectively need Bosco to mine absolutely nothing in this mission, as the only thing I have to do is the resonance scans, which I should be able to do all of myself, as Bosco doesn't do anything there. Also, it has to, so we won't need Nitro. I'm still not very fast at figuring out the resonant scanners. Although if we were to be talking about doing single segment or geared for this type of mission, then obviously the resonance scans don't really even matter anymore, so there's that. I should have been taking a lot more inference from the down arrow there, telling me to come down here, rather than trying to figure out what direction I was going. That was a pretty, even for someone who's bad at reading the scanner, that was a pretty bad misplay. And right there I was trying to gauge where the next one is, because as soon as you call in the resonance pod for one, it immediately stops registering it on your scanner, so you can start kind of honing in on the next one once the first one is done. I was considering trying to find the other one while that pod was coming down, but I wasn't sure what kind of terrain or up and down or tunnel it might have been in, so for all I knew it would have just lost me time to try to come over here and run back and forth between them. And now I can be absolutely certain that there's no time to be saved by going to look for the other one while this is dropping, so this is honestly the most, like, unemployed time in this entire run. I always have to deposit bitter gems in hopes of seeing some angel numbers. This one stumps me quite badly. I'm still pretty proud of how quickly I found it, all things considered, but I more or less just blind dig for this one. Just trying to pre-drill in the direction that I'm going to need to go once this is hooked up. So like I said, this is the only real time loss we can have in this mission other than just bad crystals, is if I let the elevator jam, so pretty much my entire time is going to be spent staring at the repair points to make sure that we don't get any jams. Yeah, I'll probably speed that up or something. That was a snooze fest. I'm already pretty tired recording this. That was almost the final nail in the coffin for me. Jesus. So if you weren't aware, for some strange reason, there's kind of this arbitrary slowdown placed on breaking the seeds with Driller's drills. Thankfully though, unlike Ebonuts now, Driller's axes can actually one-shot them open, so that makes them quite fast if you have resources to spend. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you can get underneath the drop pod if you're fast enough getting out with the extraction jet boots. Doesn't happen here, unfortunately, but sometimes if the pod lands close enough, you can get the upwarp on any class. And I've been able to clip into the pod with jet boots before, but it really just does not want to happen this time. Now I ended up picking Engineer for this Escort for a couple of different reasons. Primarily because I wanted to spend as much time with Drota not being hit by enemies, and I figured Engineer was the way to go for that. And as a slight secondary thing, I wanted to get all of the classes involved in this run somehow. So if you aren't aware, when it comes to Drota, there's not really much you can do to affect the speed of Drota missions and the progression of them. Refuels always happen in the same place. Drota has a... It's not really fuel, it's just she progresses to a certain point and then stops. However, there are two ways that you can affect the actual traversal speed of Drota. One is player proximity, basically meaning the overall percentage of the game that is near Drota affects her overall speed. So in a 4-player game, 2 players on the drill does not make it move as fast as both players in a duo. So if you look at the speed gauge above the fuel and below Drota's health, you can see her forward momentum, which is based off of, like I said, player proximity. So if I get too far away, those arrows will drop. And also, if she's been hurt by an enemy recently, the arrows will temporarily drop as well. Which is why you'll see me being extremely aggressive with the enemies, is because I'm basically trying to no-hit this mission Drota-wise. So you can see right here, I got too far away for a split second and dropped 3 arrows. The area on it is quite generous, so you saw I was just able to sidestep back towards her and get the gauge full again. So it's not really like a super tight area, but you'll see me a couple times here get a little too far and it'll drop. So when trying to do these sort of like Drota pseudo no-hits, your biggest threat is always going to be the stuff in front, because it's pretty easy to help Drota outrun the bugs that are running up behind her, especially when you have a real build and things like CC. But it's basically just the grunts that run up from the front and hit her. It's much easier for those guys to get a hit off than it is for a few grunts running along behind her trying to catch up. Trying to plan out what shale I'm going to be taking here, estimating how much I'm going to need, and I'm under the impression right now that these 3 veins are going to be enough. Getting all of this can done with that 1 vein was a huge help. If you weren't aware, if you saw what I was doing there with that oil shale, effectively, if you chop oil shale off of a wall, it generally turns into fewer pieces than if you were to laser it down piece by piece by piece. So as you can see, that remaining chunk on top looked to be like 5 or 6 laser blasts left. in reality I got it in, I think, 2 pieces because I chopped it off. This does not apply to pickaxing, obviously. It does apply to explosions, but Bosco obviously is making comparatively small pieces to what you get when you chop it off. Another pretty bad misplay that I made was not putting Bosco's mining upgrade back on before this mission. That was completely unintentional. If I'd have thought about it, I definitely would have, because having him mine oil shale faster is much more helpful than any sort of combat effect on Escort, even when trying to Doretta no-hit. So one of the main reasons I took Engineer to try to protect Doretta is lures, just because I didn't know exactly how many small enemies I'd be having to contend with, and being able to throw a lure would buy me the time to quickly pick off all the enemies and keep them from getting hit on Doretta. The main reason I didn't want to bring Scout specifically on this mission is I just wasn't entirely sure if I was going to have enough raw, hard DPS to kill everything if I was getting Praetorians. Because GK2 is pretty okay without any upgrades on it. It's just a matter of running out of ammo rather quickly when it's an unupgraded GK2. So I figured Engineer would give me a little bit more flexibility to actually get some Nitro, because Warthog has very poor ammo economy without any upgrades as well, but just the flexibility of turrets and lures gives me the ability to get that little bit of extra nitro that I need. Call it muscle memory. So now the Doretta no-hit can come to an end, because I really don't care about her taking damage here, and I really heavily doubt she would actually take any sort of critical damage at this stage on Has-2. And all that stuff I was saying about speed does not apply whenever she is drilling the Heartstone. It's a completely set time interval. Shout out to Floor Nitro. Yeah, that's about what you expect from a Has-2 Almiron. It's very rare to be able to get up warp on the drop pod whenever you're in solo. With drop pod manipulation, sometimes you can get really lucky, but most of the time it doesn't go well. And sometimes it just works. So one thing I wanted to look at there was whether or not it was 2 or 3 dreads before I picked a class. So I decided that since it was 2 dreads, I wanted to take Gunner, as there was a very real possibility that way that I would be able to do both dreads without having to resupply, if time and map layout demanded it. Also, like I said with Engineer, I like to play all the classes for this. So with the dread being the twins, I figured that I would be able to pretty comfortably lead them over to the other dread. Unfortunately, this ends up not being the case, and they spend a lot of time digging. See, this is where I expected the twins to be coming up to fight me. And this is also where I realized that I never switched boss to go back to fast digging. Thankfully we got some very convenient explosive plants to help out with the ammo economy a little bit. I was really not expecting those plants to actually tear straight through the armor flaps of the Hive Guard. Put me in a very awkward spot here. I was definitely hoping for another big hit there that would take half his health again. And seeing how much damage Minigun did to that Hive Guard definitely made me realize that I should have stayed and just fought the twins instead of trying to lead them around with me, because I probably could have killed them very, very quickly. Thankfully, the twins did coincidentally dig very, very close to where I was going. So at this point, I was considering backtracking before I saw the twins digging towards me very close by, and my plan now is to just open up more of the map while I wait for the twins to get here. That way I have a route to the drop pod no matter where it shows up. Cowardly behavior on full display from our friend the Lacerator. Shout out to the Arbalest not being there. Going this way and leading Molly along with me was definitely a gamble on actually getting the clip. So if I end up missing the clip here, it would definitely have been faster to go the other way. But there you have it. That is Chiv %. Definitely a lot of room for improvement. Though I don't think I'm going to run this again on Hazard 2. A lot of sections were just far too uninteresting. The drill elevator, the entirety of Escort, the dreadnoughts were a little bit too easy for my taste, and yeah, overall I think it just could have been much more interesting. But like I alluded to before, the way that we can check our time most accurately without having to time 10 missions up individually and add them together is in the KPI terminal, since this is a fresh file. So here we see 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 33 seconds. About half that playtime being on the Scout. Not reflective of my real save file. But yeah, that's about all I have for you today. If you have any input on how I could make this more interesting in the future, or other disjointed, non-official speedrun categories you'd like to see me pull off, I would love to hear from you. If you want me to buy a bunch of cosmetics, or upgrade a weapon, or something like that, I think it'd be a lot of fun to do. As always, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.